Choosing your target audience is so important, and the sooner you decide who you want your audience to be, the easier the writing process will be for you. Hey guys, how are you doing today? It's P.E. Gilbert, your blogger, writing consultant, and the author to the fantasy novella The Sultan's Daughter, and today we shall be discussing 4 tips on how to choose your target audience better. But before we go any further with today's content, hit that subscribe button. As we discussed in our first video in this writing tip series, choosing your target audience is usually one of the most overlooked parts of the writing process, and I was very much guilty of it. I didn't even think about my target audience until I had written 3 drafts of my manuscript and got a mentor, and that was 3 years down the line. Suffice to say, that made editing the manuscript so much more time-consuming and painful. Thus, to save you some of the agony, I have put together 4 tips that will hopefully enable you to target your audience better, and it will make the writing process a little bit easier for you as well. Tip 1. Decide your genre. The genre gives us direction as to who is likely to consume your story. Therefore, deciding your genre is the starting point to enable you to find the right audience. For example, if you'd like to tell a story about a cheeky anthropomorphic tank engine that helps out other trains, you'll most likely target young children. Likewise, if you want to tell a story about cars transforming into robots with lots of action sequences, but no significant amount of blood or grisly injuries, you will mostly target young adult and new adult males. And lastly, if you'd like to write a medieval light fantasy saga in which great noble families fight each other bitterly for a throne with all manner of explicit content to go with it, you'll mostly target an adult audience. The problem of subgenres. If you thought choosing the genre to find the right target audience was simple, well, it's usually not that simple, and that is because of the problem of subgenres, where there is a lot of crossover. As I am a fantasy author, the fantasy genre is what I know best, and there are a ton of subcategories for the fantasy genre, such as high, light fantasy, low/dark/grimdark fantasy, young adult /YA fantasy, comic fantasy, urban fantasy, and historical fantasy. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. Nevertheless, this list touches upon where a lot of the crossover can happen. For instance, in the 1960s when The Lord of the Rings came out, it was generally read by adults. But today, a high/light fantasy story would generally be targeted for children and teenagers. But didn't adults read and enjoy Harry Potter as well? Another example where the issue of crossover is even more pertinent is in the urban fantasy subgenre. Twilight was aimed for a young adult and new adult female audience, but it gained considerable traction among twi guys. And the same is true for the dark fantasy subgenre as well, even though those books and films are generally speaking targeted for an adult audience. George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire and Joe Abercrombie's The First Law trilogy were both aimed for an adult male audience. However, George R.R. Martin's books have gained a greater female to male readership ratio than Joe Abercrombie's. We'll discuss why this may be the case in the next tip. Tip 2. Choose the right main character for your target audience. If choosing the right genre and subgenre are the first steps to enable you to target your audience better, then choosing the right POV characters is a close second. This is because the audience will identify the most with the POV characters. So for example, if you wanted to write a TV series about an adolescent witch hiding her identity in order to live a normal life, it would be best to A. Target an audience of teenage and pre-teenage girls, and B. Make the main character a teenage girl. Similarly, a key reason why A Song of Ice and Fire has such a strong female readership is because George R.R. Martin has put in many strong female point-of-view characters at the heart of his novels. This is in comparison to Joe Abercrombie, who has one female point-of-view character in his trilogy. Yeah, that may explain why George R.R. Martin has more female readers than Joe Abercrombie. Keeping with a female audience, if you like the romance genre, I have a couple of books that you will absolutely adore. ML Broome has written A Series of Moments and Alchemy Unfolding. That's A Series of Moments by ML Broome and Alchemy Unfolding by ML Broome. I had the privilege of interviewing ML Broome on my blog last year. She is a wonderful person, and her books are full of real romance, flawed heroes, and flawless love. If that's the kind of books you enjoy reading, check out her books and the interview that I did with her. I have left links in the description below. Tip 3. Decide the style of writing. Once you have decided your genre, your subgenre, and who your main character will be, it is advisable to A. Focus on the style of writing that is fitting for your genre, and B. Focus on the content that is fitting for your chosen genre. A. Choose the style of writing that is fitting for your genre. It goes a bit without saying that there is a wide variety of different writing styles out there. J.R.R. Tolkien writes differently to George R.R. Martin. Sir Ian Fleming writes differently to John le Carré. And Gillian Flynn writes differently to Paula Hawkins. Still, a reader can see themes in these authors' styles that are consistent with the genre and subgenre in which they write. A smart thing to do is to read as many books as you can within the genre in which you wish to write. That way, you can get a flavour for the kind of writing styles and turn of phrases that are consistent with the genre. For instance, if you wanted to write a high fantasy series, it would be good to read and assess the writing styles of David Eddings and David Gemmell so that you can take inspiration from them, i.e., take what you like from them and do away with what you don't like. However, it is also important to read in and around your chosen genre so that you know what not to write. If you want to write a thriller, it would not be clever to use an academic or analytical style of writing because this will most likely put your audience to sleep. God, that sounded cynical. Similarly, it would be silly to write a high fantasy novel aimed for children and teenagers and use inappropriate language. Simply, it would not be suitable for the target audience. B. Make the content fitting for your genre. As a writer, you have to be aware as to what is and what is not appropriate for your genre in order to cater to the target audience. Broadly speaking, if you want to write a detective story, you must make a piece of criminal activity be the focus of your narrative, rather than the focus being a nice, mushy story about a young couple falling in love. Likewise, if you want to write a TV show about a purple dinosaur singing happy songs to kids, you cannot put a car chase and explosions into the narrative. More specifically, for those who want to write fantasy stories, it is best that you decide how much magic you want in your story and how violent and/or sexual you want your scenes to be. In general, the more magic there is in your story, the higher the fantasy story will be. This entails that it is for a younger audience, and therefore explicit content cannot be present in the narrative. Conversely, if you want less magic and more scenes of an explicit nature, the darker, grimmer your story will be, and this entails that your narrative will be for a more mature audience. Tip 4. Don't go for a catch-all approach. But P.E. Gilbert, the Mission Impossible, Harry Potter and James Bond franchises go for a catch-all approach, so why can't I? Would it not be a clever strategy to go for a catch-all approach to draw in as many people as possible? The answer to both of those questions is a resounding no. Going for a catch-all approach defeats the entire purpose of targeting an audience, plus it makes for a muddled story that cannot make up its mind on what it wants to be. For example, take Josh Trank's 2015 Fantastic Four, which was widely derided as Fant4Stick. The Fantastic Four are meant to be superheroes in brightly coloured, goofy outfits that save the world from Dr. Victor Von Doom. The risible nature of the villain's name is supposed to give the Fantastic Four a fun, campy edge that is meant for a predominantly young adult male audience. But Josh Trank's movie darkened everything in an attempt to replicate Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy, even to the point of giving a really disturbing slant to where The Thing got his "it's clobbering time" saying. Trank tried to make his movie fitting for adults in addition to teenagers, and it failed miserably because he forgot that the Fantastic Four are meant for a relatively young audience. The overall result of Fant4Stick was a terrible, cynical attempt to rake in as much money as possible. And guess what? It didn't work. Another fruitcake of a film that went for a cynical catch-all approach was the recent Birds of Prey film starring Margot Robbie. Don't get me wrong, it's not a terrible film, it just has a lot of issues. Harley Quinn is part of the DC comic universe, and comic book films tend to appeal to a young adult and new adult male audience. However, Birds of Prey took its core demographic for granted as it preached an uber-feminist, all men are pigs message in the hope of luring more women to pay to watch this film. And guess what again? It failed. No one wants to watch this mess of a movie. Birds of Prey made just under $202 million at the box office, and according to Variety, the film needed to gross between $250 and $300 million worldwide in order to break even. This probably explains why the sequel has recently been cancelled. Oh dear. The moral of the story here is clear. Don't go for a catch-all approach. Don't try and take shortcuts in the hope of making a quick buck or two. Choose a target audience and cater to them rigidly. But P.E. Gilbert, you still haven't answered the original question. The James Bond, Harry Potter and Mission Impossible franchises go for the widest possible target audience, so why can't I? Yes, today, the Harry Potter, Mission Impossible and James Bond franchises do go for a catch-all approach. But the optimum word here is nowadays. Neither Sir Ian Fleming nor J.K. Rowling started off by adopting a catch-all approach for their novels. Initially, Sir Ian Fleming wrote his James Bond series as a satire, a glamorous satire at that, on the espionage world. Rowling, on the other hand, wrote her Harry Potter series as a high fantasy saga aimed for young children and new adults. Fleming and Rowling, as well as subsequent Hollywood executive producers, only went for a catch-all approach after these novels and films had become phenomenally successful. Thus, once you have a large, diverse readership and audience, and please God this will happen for you, then and only then can you go for a catch-all approach. Some general conclusions. From the 4 tips that we have discussed, we can deduce the following few tips that are general rules on how you can target your audience better, and these are: 1. The lighter the story, the more it caters for a younger audience. 2. The darker and more gritty the story, the more the narrative caters for a more mature audience. And 3. The more female point of view characters there are in your story, the more your narrative caters for a female audience. These rules are not an exact science, but they can give you a solid idea for who you should target as per your audience when you set out to write your story. And that's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed this video and found it useful and interesting. Like, comment and hit that subscribe button, and tell me, what do you think of my tips? What do you think I've missed out? Moreover, my debut fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter, is out. It is short, fast-paced and full of suspense, and it is targeted for fantasy lovers and women. Check it out, I have left a link in the description below. Otherwise, join me next time when we will discuss how to create an epic battle. Until then, keep well. Once again, guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it and I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button and then you will be the first to receive more awesome content from my channel, and I hope to see you again soon.